Our focus today is going to be about reconnecting and resourcing yourself. And how do we do that when we get dysregulated? So let's start with just taking a nice, long, deep breath. And take a moment to notice how you're feeling in your body. And that the breath alone brings a sense of calm. Feel your feet on the ground. All of us have this ancient, deep, cherishing mother inside. And I'm referring to our source connection as a cherishing mother. And for many people, cherishing mother wasn't always available. So here we're connecting to that space inside of us that gives us a sense of resource, a sense of calm, a sense of stability, a sense of I can. And there are times when we feel dysregulated, and that sense of I can seems to vanish, and overwhelm can happen, disconnection can happen. And all of that happens for a good reason. It's our body, it's our nervous system giving us some very important information. So I want to welcome, if there is any of that happening, for you to let that be here. At the same time, while you let the base of your body ground and fill itself out, as if you have roots at the base, at the hip carriage, that travel down through your legs into the ground. Mother Source medicine is always right here beneath your feet. She doesn't go anywhere. So a lot of the deeper healing work that so many of us are invited to do or want to do has to do with this descending into the body. There are many approaches that can take us up and out. And in that alone, there's a disconnect. So here we get to come back down and in and acknowledge our human parts. So welcoming everything without the need to, even effort to accept or reject any part. And often even hearing the word mother can be a trigger for some people. And that's understandable. I happen to be a biological mother. And I know for me, hearing the word mom sometimes can be a trigger. But I think if you listen and feel inside of yourself that there is a space of comfort that is often calling to us, it's our own inner source connection for healing, for mending, for gathering our strength, our resilience, to be deeply resourced. So important in this time of uncertainty all around us that can create a sense of feeling unsettled or dysregulated. So to know that this connection, this resource, is always here inside. And the breath is a doorway. All of us have a little bit of a different design, so we learn what helps us to come into our bodies. For some people, it's being out in nature, feeling your feet on the earth, taking in some nourishment through food, perhaps listening to music or dancing. Being in good company. Whatever it is that lets that energy of you that may kind of go out and disconnect and feel almost like you're peripheral to your own experience. You know, like you get sucked into something outside of you or into somebody else's experience. So you just remember, come back, come back, come back here. I wanted to give an opportunity to start for you to feel calm in your own system. So I want to talk just a little bit about trauma, which is a word that we hear a lot. So I want to unpack that a little bit because I asked myself this question earlier this week. It's only Tuesday, so maybe it was Sunday. We hear this all the time, and I am a trauma-informed therapist. And, you hear that trauma, trauma, trauma. I'm feeling my trauma is triggered. I've been traumatized. And let's like look at what that is. So trauma, the original meaning of the word is wound. And we can understand quite easily when we have a physical wound on the body because it's visible. You can see it. Whether it be a cut or a break, something opens, it's cut, there's a severing. And in that severing, there's, something disconnects from what it was prior connected to. And we know how to attend to physical wounds. We're very well trained in that. First we have to let it air, clean it well and give it some air to breathe. Now there can be different degrees of wounding. Some wound might need a casting or bracing or more rest. So that allows us to be unique in however our wounding might happen. The uniqueness of that means we also might have a unique approach in how we treat that. Now, psychological wounding or psychic wounding, emotional wounding, isn't really any different, but it tends to be invisible to us. So a person can be traveling through life with emotional wounding and where it's not actually visible. Although for the person in their interior life, they may feel estranged from themselves, disconnected, not at ease, and they have a sense that something's not quite right, something is off. So let's call that emotional wounding, psychological wounding, which needs the same kind of care and attention, oftentimes even more, because invisible wounds can have a kind of a cumulative effect until there may be some kind of explosion, big trigger that happens in life, and it all comes to the front. I say that now because in our collective, we're in a place like this, where in our global field, there's so much change happening that is taking away some of the ways in which we may have learned how to cope. Because when there's an invisible wound that isn't attended to, there's a coping strategy that gets engaged. And now here, some of the ways of connecting with people or participating in certain events aren't available in the same way they used to be. So here we might even be brought to a place of, wow, there's like, you can't move away from this anymore. Here you are at home, locked down, or whatever you want to call it. And what hasn't been addressed might be really up in the surface. So this is an opportunity. And I want to speak about windows of tolerance, windows of resource. So trauma is a wound, and the main function of the brain, the most important part of the brain prior to anything else, is safety. That's its job, is to keep us safe. So when there's a wounding, a trigger or a wound, it's like the brain kind of, I'm going to do a visual. Let's see if I can get it right, because I'm can't really see, but here, say this is what your brain looks like from the back. Like this is the amygdala here. It's in the back of the brain. And in the front is the frontal lobe. That's here, the front. And the frontal lobe is what allows us to make rational decisions, to be in the present. And when trauma is, when we're triggered, the amygdala, its function is an alarm system. So it has a wonderful function. We need that. It goes like this, right? And it tells us, whoa, I gotta, I have to run. I have to protect myself. So it will flee, fight, or freeze. And we would not survive without this system. So when that's happening, we have to learn how do we bring that back to calm? So then what becomes available to us is the frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe is able to operate very well when we're in a space of calm, where we're rooted in our bodies, where we reconnect. So the first thing that we can do is breathe. So when this is triggered, our past is behaving as if it's happening in the present, meaning we might not necessarily be in danger, but the amygdala is telling us that we are. And this is happening now for many people. So we use this cherishing mother source connection to come back into ourselves, to breathe. First thing we do is we breathe back in the body and we reconnect through our feet to the ground. And when we reconnect, it's this place of calm becomes available to us. And I'm doing this kind of quickly. It doesn't mean that when you're triggered that you come to a place of calm so quickly. No, not really. But I'm just wanting to give you the outline. So then the frontal lobe becomes available. And in that, we become present and we get to see the circumstances that we're in right now as they are. So we're not in that prior place, whether it be in a hospital or in a fight with a police officer or some other kind of very challenging, perhaps violent situation, a fire, where there was real danger, but the system hasn't, the psychological nervous system hasn't healed from it all the way yet. So there's a part that gets triggered. There's a part that disconnects. There's an early wound that still hasn't learned that it's safe, that it's okay, that you're safe now. And this is how we reconnect, and we allow the nervous system to integrate new information. We become resourced. So a piece gets to heal, it gets to come together, gets to be seen, heard, and felt. Because what we hear can heal. And what we feel can heal. And sometimes we need a person to be this place of resonance and ground in mother, in the mature ancient mother that is earth, that is ground, that is holding space, that is witness. We have this in us, but sometimes we need another person to be that for us. So then each time that, being triggered is a good thing, right? Because that's good information. It's the body, the nervous system saying, there's still a part out here that hasn't quite reconnected, hasn't quite settled, hasn't quite healed. Yeah, so we get that piece of information and we welcome it. We feel it, we see it, we hear it. We let it come back home to source. And there's a mending. And with each mending, it's like, gold. It's like a piece of you is mended and then it feels golden. Like what a treasure then to have yourself back. More shine, more beauty, more resiliency. Each time that we gather something back to ourselves, we sit more strong. It's like we take up more space in our own skin. Yeah, more comfort in this body, in this vessel. Yeah. So I think it's important to remember, how do we resource ourselves when we feel, a disconnect? I call that a wound or a trigger of early trauma. Because on one side, part of us wants to disconnect, wants to not know, wants to shut down and just go on as if it's not happening. And another part over here is just an overwhelm. Yeah, and it can't deal. It feels like it can't deal, like can't do this, can't cope. But here in the middle is a window of tolerance, a window of resource that we can drop into when we remember that we have our own source connection inside, always here waiting. And we gather something back to ourselves. The amygdala is calm, comes back, it relaxes. The frontal lobe is able to function from current information about our situation which might mean there's other things to attend to in the life. And we listen, we sort that out from a place of calm. Maybe we research something, we have to gather information. Maybe we have to even just listen more to ourselves. Often that's the case, because we know more about ourselves than anybody else. We can come into a deeper trusting with what we know about our own life experience, our deeply lived experience with all of its shifts and turns, ups and downs. Nobody knows that better than us. So retreat, pause, is a wonderful time to listen to what you already know inside and to reflect that back to yourself.